Imagine you're on a cargo ship sailing somewhere just beyond the solar system. You've been told to head to the cockpit, so you do, the doors open, you jaunt down the hallway, and then... Weird. You only remember one hallway here last time, but maybe you're misremembering. The background music suddenly isn't so sure. You then find a staggeringly long stairway leading down into the abyss, just waiting to swallow you. This isn't the cockpit, but you hesitantly follow it down. What is going on here? Finally, you find the door to the cockpit, except... This isn't right. You've got to go back. Oh. A hungry expanse of nothing pins you to this tiny, rusted ledge. You only have one real choice. It's wet. You feel your socks and boots become tight, heavy mouths around your toes and ankles as you clumsily stumble your way through this sea of ethereal bile. Suddenly, the stars come out. You can see the cosmos and every manner of celestial breath filling the heavens, and for a moment, it's kinda lovely. It's terrifying, but somehow okay. You keep going, and then... primal questions fly up your brainstem. What is that? Where is that? You start looking around, but where the hell is it? You hear something other than your footsteps in the water. What the hell is it? You do the only thing you can and run. Sirens blare, screams materialize in the air, metal scraps erupt from the water. The thing gets louder as you desperately run for your life.
Mom, what are you doing?
Raise your hand if this has ever happened to you before. You open a door in a video game and there is something completely impossible behind it. A dark void, the room you just left, a hallway that is a hall not this way. Maybe you've turned around and suddenly something is there now that wasn't there before. Maybe the entire landscape has seamlessly changed. Maybe you catch something out of the corner of your eye and it makes you become a little smaller in your seat. Maybe the game whispers something to you and you...
Yeah. Call the police.
These are all examples of ways that video games specifically make us feel like we're hallucinating. It could be an outright fever dream, a nightmare, a surreal dream sequence. These kinds of moments serve the purpose of giving you an intimate glimpse into your character's crumbling psyche. Typically you see them in horror games, but you'll certainly find them elsewhere, and I am kind of enamored with them. Sometimes they're skin-crawling explorations of a character's repressed trauma. Other times they're harrowing warnings of evil yet to come. Sometimes they're strangely beautiful. Sometimes they're that scene from Happy Gilmore. Oh, God! What I'd like to do today is break them down piece by piece.
Call the police.
Moments not just from video games, but also cinema and television and animation. What can they learn from one another? Why do they make you squirm? How can they make you laugh? When do they become something more than just horrific imagery? As you saw at the start, there is so much more to this than just showing us something spooky and then smash cutting to someone waking up in a cold sweat. I want to talk to you about the subtle methods that these sequences use to quietly slip under your skin and invade your subconscious until your bones itch. If that sounds fun, or not fun, then get cozy. Know that any spoilers today will be purely visual. I'm not digging too deeply into any plots, and also, there will be no jump scares. There will, however, be, perhaps, the opportunity of a lifetime. Working is a part of life. You need a paycheck to fund your basic needs: food, shelter, electricity, more Magic the Gathering cards if you're like me. But what if working was just as fulfilling and confidence building as your favorite game? The folks at Boot.dev have dared to ask this question. If you've ever been even a little bit interested in coding, it could be the career for you, and it could start here. Boot.dev is perhaps the smartest way to learn back-end web development in the Python and Go programming languages because it overcomes the largest problem in online learning: Boredom. They use tactics from modern game design to keep you engaged and constantly discovering new concepts and techniques. Lessons are formatted like an RPG. You'll earn XP, levels, achievements, and complete quests. Heck, there are even bi-monthly boss fights where the community comes together to earn bonus XP. And the community is a big part of this as well. It's easier to learn when there are others involved. If you have questions or need to bounce ideas off someone, there is an active Boot.dev Discord just waiting to welcome you. It's honestly an incredible little thing that they've built here, and if you're hesitant, no worries. Go take a free demo of some of the courses, or pay for it and enjoy a 30-day no questions asked refund policy. This is no get-rich-quick scheme. Boot.dev takes the time to truly go in depth and prepare you for a career. This could be a big moment for you. To take the first step on your journey, go to Boot.dev and use my code DarylTalksGames to get 25% off your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. This is one of my favorite sponsors because I really believe in what they're doing over there. Thanks again to Boot.dev. Now back to the show. That sequence we opened the video with is one of the early hallucinations in a game called Mouthwashing, and to me, it's kind of the blueprint for what most video game fever dreams do. It makes you feel like you're losing grip on reality by using a handful of tried and true techniques that you'll find across all of storytelling. We'll get to each of them and then eventually into some other techniques, but the first of these is environmental irregularities, when the space you were in is behaving suspiciously. And we see this all over the place. PT is famous for the whole repeating room bit, where each time you exit this room through this door, somehow you end up back at the entrance again, despite this going against the laws of physics. Clearly, this whole jaunt is metaphysical in nature. You'll find no shortage of nightmarish architecture in the horror genre. You get that same repeated room sequence in Silent Hill: The Short Message and MiSide. In fact, MiSide has a ton of structural tomfoolery. Endless foyers, hallways that expand the further you walk through them, rearranging rooms that have not loaded. Now, it's worth mentioning that you aren't exactly dreaming or hallucinating here. Your character is trapped in a video game, hence the loading screen, but techniques like this have been used all over gaming for years to disorient you when you play and make it very clear that your character has lost their marbles. And this is one area where video games might have a little bit more creative room. How many doors do you walk through in any given game? 10, 20, 100? At some point, there is an established expectation that when you open one, something that makes sense will be on the other side. But with cinema, typically these visions give themselves away early because only now is it important that you see this person nap. Only now is it important that we see this door in the background of a restroom that will suddenly lead into a completely different place than it did before. Spatial silliness, I'm gonna find every possible way to say this differently. Floor plan shenanigans accomplishes the same goal in both cases here, but in a game, there is an extra layer of habituation that creates a deeper shock value when a place you think you know well is behaving in a way it shouldn't. And the same goes with music. Games have taught us that background music is there to match the activity we're doing and tell us what to feel. If we're solving puzzles in the desert, it should sound like this. If we're in the corporate supervillain's headquarters, it should sound like this. If we're running errands on a space freighter, it should sound like this. So when that music begins to miss a few notes and loses tempo, what exactly are we doing now? How should this make us feel? You see, dream sequences typically use their music to send you in one of two directions, either directly into the teeth of the nightmare or ejecting you from the nightmare. You've seen the latter plenty of times. Things are slowly getting more and more uncanny. The camera does that Hitchcock zoom, or cuts rapidly between the imagery, or slowly pans on the horrifying thing and the music gets louder and shriller until there is a relief there just after the crescendo that replicates what waking up from a real nightmare is like. It's a ripping of the band-aid, and it signals the climax of the sequence. The other direction, into the dream, is much more subtle. It's in Doki Doki Literature Club when the notes begin to get glitchy and fall off beat. It's in The Punisher when the song slowly sours as this sweet delusion goes drastically wrong. It's going from no music to a subtle, eerie track that begins to echo a horrifying realization. The music that signals the beginning of the sequence is unsettling in a completely different way than the crescendo, because it's not offering relief from the nightmare, but instead introducing you to it, and now calling to question everything you see from this moment on. I always go back to that scene from House MD when House realizes that he's been hallucinating, which completely recontextualizes how he spent his last 48 hours. This is not a wake up it was all a dream tool, it is a you can no longer trust what's in front of you tool. And I think that's why music that sends you into the dream is so unsettling to come across, because there is a betrayal that takes place when the story suddenly calls to question what you're experiencing. It creates a lingering pit in your stomach, which is totally different from the panicked relief of being ripped from some hyper-violent vision. And the importance of that relief can't be understated. Because as fun as it is to have these big bombastic dream sequences with otherworldly visuals, if a story is chock full of them from beginning to end, well, that could destroy its ability to truly affect you. The Scarecrow sequence in Batman Arkham Asylum works as well as it does because it's completely unexpected. The glitch and shifting perspective and the game over are so memorable for the same reasons as the nightmare sequence in Max Payne. You wouldn't be surprised at a sequence like this in a psychological horror game, but when this is a story that has thus far been completely based on reality and your expectation is that it's going to remain that way, these sequences are a welcome surprise and contrast the rest of the story beautifully. If the game is constantly throwing visions at you from the start, you might become numb to it. That's not to say you're not enjoying this bizarre world you're exploring, but it doesn't hotwire your mind quite like it would if it's used sparingly and carefully. There's an old interview with Quentin Tarantino where he mentions that confusion is a surefire way to rip you from a story unless you can trust that the film is going to resolve that confusion for you.
I know as a viewer, the minute I start getting confused, I check out of the movie. However, if you get confused, there's no problem with being momentarily confused if you feel you're in good hands.
And I think this is why experimental films like Black Moon, or The Science of Sleep, or Paprika, or even games like Hypnospace Outlaw and Hylix aren't for everyone. In many ways, they're kaleidoscopes that want to bask in their surrealism and allow you to interpret their meaning. They can rest their laurels on their gorgeous absurdity. And maybe they're not for you personally, but the value there as a viewer comes from wading through the confusion like a tie-dye puzzle, connecting the dots and constructing your interpretation. To me, these hallucinogenic parades of the impossible represent the highest setting on the dream sequence dial. But when storytellers turn that dial back down to a very low value and sneak these sequences in where they're least expected, that's when they have the ability to truly fray away at your grip on reality. When you're watching a movie and a dream sequence happens, there is usually a point at which you go, hang on, this has to be a dream. Where the stakes kind of crumble and you realize, no, this isn't really happening, and then you can safely view the remainder of it as a bystander with the comfort that any moment now they'll wake up and this will be inconsequential. In most cases, you're right. I've always found myself most captivated when one of these scenes makes me work for that sentence, when the transition to that dream is so disguised and the imagery is so normal that I don't know it's a dream until right before they wake up. It's effectively had me under its spell for the duration of the nightmare, just like an actual nightmare does. And many scenes in both cinema and in gaming make it obvious intentionally and just let the vision do the work. It's clear in Twilight Princess that these chilling visuals aren't real because the camera pins in on Link closing his eyes, and then the linear spirit begins telling him a story. In King Arthur, we get cuts between the dream and the dreamer, clearly indicating what you're looking at. This isn't wrong, by the way. Their purpose here isn't to make you feel like you're dreaming or make you question what's real, it's to make it clear that this isn't, so that you can just look in as a passive viewer. But if the developers or the directors want to make you a participant, they disguise the beginning of these moments so that it's less obvious. Maybe instead of cutting from a sleeping person to the dream, we just open on a scene that feels pretty ordinary until later you realize it's all been a dream. Even better, at some point during a well-established scene, it silently becomes a dream unbeknownst to you and the dreamer. By far, my favorite example of this is in The Nice Guys. Ryan Gosling comments that he's getting sleepy and that he might need to pull over and let Russell Crowe drive. To which Russell responds,
"You don't have to pull over. The car can drive itself."
Ryan gives him a look, then takes his hands off the wheel. Sure enough, the car drives itself.
I didn't know it could do that.
He lights himself a cigarette, and then they begin talking about pollution with the giant bumblebee in the back seat.
Wake up! Wake up! March!
I fucking love that movie. And while it's used for humor here, my god, it's smooth and tucked away. It slowly becomes more absurd, as dreams often do, but at first, it's just conceivable enough for you to go, huh, okay then. We usually don't remember falling asleep. It's called mesograde amnesia. It happens, and then we wake up confused an hour later on the couch. Since we never see Ryan Gosling pass out here, it translates like a regular flow of consciousness would. This setup is extremely effective at getting the viewer to say, oh, this is a dream, much later in the dream. There's a scene like this in Heavenly Delusion that had my heart rate doing backflips because it hid the lie just like this. And this is typically how games hide their lies, because your experience with them is often not a series of scenes. They can't disguise one of these quite as readily between one scene and the next if you stay with one perspective the whole game. So if a game wants you to experience a vision without it being immediately obvious that it is a vision, it'll have you seamlessly happen upon it. Maybe a glitch, maybe something vanishes, maybe you think you see something and now you're sitting there wiping your glasses. Resounding, feverish portraits you'll find in some of the nightmares we've talked about are like crashing a motorcycle face first into a shotgun blast. They should make you jump and squirm. But subtle, well-disguised moments like this whisper in Silent Hill 2 that only shows up on some playthroughs, or the chair in the background of The Shining that suddenly isn't there in between shots, carefully carve into your skin as you sleep, gently encroaching on your sanity. We'll talk more about this game in a bit, but Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a masterful example of using both of these styles of vision. Some of the transitions into Senua's episodes in this game are just tremendously well done. It is often delicate and intentional, but it also doesn't stray away from dialing things up to 100. And what sets Senua's Hallucinations and a few others in a class of their own is not just how seamlessly they move you into them, but how they make you question where they truly end. Take this scene from Hereditary. We open on a scene of a woman struggling to get to sleep. She turns over to find ants crawling on her pillow. This is not helping her get sleepy. Understandably confused and irritated, she slowly rises from the bed and begins to hunt down the source of the ants. The trail leads her carefully down the hallway and hesitantly into her son's bedroom. She has found the source of the trail, and the realization spills over her in slow, agonizing waves. The ants are feasting on her son's rotting corpse. Horror crawls across her face as her lungs choke back a blood-curdling scream.
Mom, what are you doing?
Her son is fine. She was sleepwalking. They then have a small conversation, the contents of which I won't spoil. But it quickly becomes heated. There is arguing and screaming, and suddenly they're both covered in sweat. You hear someone strike a match. Is that sweat actually gasoline? I know this came out like 7 years ago, but I only just saw it, and this part gave me goosebumps so fucking rigid that I could have grated cheese on my arm. The dream within a dream trope is a perfect way to deceive the viewer or the player. It's one of the many ways to not just stun them, but to actually make them just as apprehensive as the character in the story is. A good dream sequence takes you for a theme park ride through a character's emotions. A great dream sequence puts you in their skin and makes you live those emotions. Because now you no longer have the safety blanket or relief of the dream being over. What's to say this too isn't also a dream? It's a slippery slope if you're a writer, because you don't want to do this so much that the audience is questioning what the point even is, since it could all be a dream at this rate. Like, why get invested in any of these scenes if you're just going to keep ripping them out from under me?
I check out of the movie.
But done sparingly, it does call to question what you can trust and makes for a much more intimate experience. And it's not just subtlety, but also how grounded these are, how reasonable they are. One of the things that made the big twist in House so effective was that his hallucinations were plausible. He didn't see 100 copies of Cuddy falling from a dark abyss giggling all the way down, or hear an indescribable behemoth in an ocean under the stars. He just had interactions with people he already knew, was told things people could potentially say. There was a certain level of trust we give when we play a game or watch a show. We have to trust that perspective, that what's being shown is actually happening in that fictional reality, that it's canon, right? And by keeping the dreams and hallucinations subtle and convincing, it builds that trust when you consume them, which makes breaking it for a big twist later so damn effective. And video games have the unique opportunity to add another layer to that trust. Here's what I mean. In Hellblade, much of your experience goes something like this. With any basic task, you'll never be alone. The voices in Senua's head always chime in to whatever she is doing.
She can get up now. How can she get up?
And as it turns out, this is a pretty accurate portrayal of some forms of psychosis. Developer Ninja Theory worked with psychiatrists and actual patients recovering from episodes of hallucinations to build their game. If you play this and see something horrifying or incredible, it was likely inspired by what these real-life people have experienced. One of those things is the voices coming from every direction. Some close, some far, some kind, some cruel. The work they did on this alone is phenomenal and just echoes everything else we've talked about. But playing this, you still know it's all a hallucination. It's fascinating to be within this audiovisual spectacle, but how exactly does it build your trust? Well, combat in this game keeps the camera pinholed down your line of sight. You don't have nearly as much freedom as you would in a ton of other games, so when you're surrounded and being attacked from another angle, the voices are what keep you safe. They'll cue you to move, they'll help you with puzzles, they'll give you little directions.
If you hear the song of Valravan, follow it, and it will lead you to him.
Despite their maddening bullying and ridicule of Senua, they also help her sometimes.
Don't let them surround you. Don't let them get behind you.
And this is where video games can do something really special, because what does it say about you that you're relying on them? That you're giving a hallucination any amount of credence, that you're behaving as you are because the voices in your head told you to. I'm referencing a video by Leonardo da Cinci, someone who actually lives with psychosis. He makes this exact point.
In Hellblade, your only indication is one of your voices telling you to watch out. And right there, that is dangerous. Developing trust with a hallucination is the first step to everything going awry.
Some of his insights at how accurately Senua portrays his symptoms is just fascinating to hear. I really can't recommend that video enough, but this is that extra layer of trust that games can betray to make visions leave you so on edge. Disco Elysium is a game I'm playing right now, and it does this beautifully. The detective you control has so many voices in his head. They interject and try to get him to do aggressive things. They nudge you to make sexual advances and drink and smoke and indulge this guy's primal urges. And I typically turn them down, except sometimes they're kind of helpful.
I softened him up as best I could. Now it's on you to finish the job.
There's a part where he hallucinates talking to this corpse, and another when one of the voices walks him through the crime scene, and both are actually very productive to the case. There are moments when the voices make progressing the game easier. I start to think as I play this, maybe this dude works better when he's buzzed. He has amnesia after all. Maybe finding drugs or something to take the edge off would help me get to the truth quicker. Maybe I should ask this guy for a cigarette. And then when trying to bum that cigarette ruins a questioning and actually makes my job harder, I suddenly realize that I am this guy. The type of decision I just made is what got him in the situation he's in. I knew that voice wasn't real, and yet I trusted it. Why did I do that? Why did I do this? The detective asks himself. It's a deep first-person glimpse into a fictional character's psyche that is spectacularly more empathetic than just showing me that character rolling around in their sleep as we cut to their deepest fears. And again, that's not to take away from some of the simultaneously stunning and harrowing visuals we've talked about today. The opening example, despite the terror of it, is most memorable to me because of the strange peace I felt looking up at the stars. It was a surreal moment being alone with my thoughts under what I imagine the sky looks like from the other side of the galaxy. There is a unique warmth to hearing Cinema's voices being kind to her.
Finish this!
There's something satisfying about the voices in Disco Elysium giving me a lead, something enchanting about the fact that although none of these visions are strictly real, their contents are brutally honest, more conversationally real with the character than reality in many ways. There is a refreshing clarity in the fog, a welcome purity to the truth they present. Many of these come off as hellish and hard to look at, but the truth often is. Professor Paul Fletcher, one of the psychiatrists Ninja Theory consulted, clarified that hallucinations are not as simple as brain dysfunction, but that in fact,
it's not like the system shut down. It's actually an incredibly creative process. The person creates a world populated with voices and phantasms and terrors, and they're completely immersed in it. They believe in it.
And that's what makes these sequences so enamoring to me. They only exist because someone has constructed them. These characters have conceived these nightmares because very often there is something repressed, something ignored, something asleep that is begging to be woken up and acknowledged. They're funhouse mirrors that give us a reflection more voracious than anything else can, even if that reflection is not always a welcome sight. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Apologies on the voiceover, I was getting over the flu whenever I was recording this, so if I sound really nasally or gross, that's why. Let me know down below what fever dream or hallucination I didn't mention that I should have. Like the video, share it, subscribe, and if you really want to support the show as well as get a ton of bonus content like bloopers, creative input, editing live streams, and weekly updates, for $1 a month, come join my Patreon page, link in the description. Thank you very, very much to this month's featured patrons. Justin Payne, Opale, 34 Mark, Robin Fawkes, Stickman99534, Emmett James, Backlog Wizard Nick, and Kokudoru. Thanks again, y'all. Take care, sweet dreams, and have yourself a damn good one.
But whatever happens, you can't fall in love with me. Even if you think you have, it's not real.